Good day, folks. Thank you for joining us here at Your Health. On today's program, we want to talk about the miraculous compound curcumin. Curcumin is extracted from the plant turmeric. Since our last discussion of curcumin just some 6-8 weeks ago, there have been over 60 research articles published at the National Institutes of Health. And what you will learn today is amazing. We want to get you up to speed on this new information. There is true hope, true potential in this compound curcumin. It is simply amazing, and I know you'll enjoy it. Stay tuned for that. But first, let's go to our news. Let's see what's happening in the health world. Taking oral steroids, such as prednisone, may cause severe vitamin D deficiency. Researchers from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City evaluated more than 31,000 children and adults. They found if patients had taken oral steroids within 1 month, they were twice as likely to have vitamin D levels below 10 nanograms per milliliter. If patients were less than 18 years old and had taken oral steroids, they were 18 times more likely to be severely deficient in vitamin D. Wow, this one will get your attention. Oral steroids deplete vitamin D levels. Now, this study collected data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. They found if the subject had used oral steroids within the preceding month, they were twice as likely to have severe vitamin D deficiency. And if the user was a child, they were 18 times more likely to be tragically low in D. Let's do a little extrapolation from these figures. The study found 1% of the American population had taken oral steroids such as prednisone, dexamethasone, or even a Medrol dose pack. So that would mean at any given time, some 3 million Americans are on oral steroids. Now, if the findings hold true and 11% of the steroid users become low in D, that would mean some 330,000 Americans have vitamin D levels so low that they could die from it. And even worse, the health of these unfortunate souls will most certainly continue to decline, and they will probably be given even more steroids, making the problem worse. Bottom line, if you take oral steroids, even just occasionally, you need extra vitamin D. And keep in mind, your original health problem that required you to take steroids may be in fact caused by a vitamin D deficiency, and your therapy is just making the problem worse. Liver cancer is on the rise, and it may be due to an increase of Americans with metabolic syndrome or prediabetes. New research from the National Cancer Institute finds the rate of hepatocellular carcinoma has doubled, while the rate of intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma has increased by more than 150%. Researchers evaluated the health profiles of some 4,400 patients with primary liver cancer. Then they compared them with almost 200,000 individuals without cancer. They found metabolic syndrome almost doubled the risk of developing primary liver cancer. Folks, there are two basic types of liver cancer. The more common type spreads or metastasizes to the liver from distant organs such as the colon. The second type develops within the liver. That is what we are calling primary liver cancer, and it is far less common than the metastatic form in this country. This study found that the rate of primary liver cancer has almost doubled over the past 10 years, and it's due in large part to the increasing incidence of metabolic syndrome. Now, this conclusion makes sense. However, this study has overlooked one critical factor. It has long been known that fungi belonging to the Aspergillus family create a toxin called aflatoxin. When humans are exposed over time to aflatoxin, it also causes primary liver cancer. It is also known that aflatoxin-producing Aspergillus fungi loves to grow on corn. In fact, virtually every sample of corn ever tested tests positive for the presence of aflatoxin. We also know from past research that when corn is converted to corn syrup, at least some of the corn's aflatoxin may be retained in the corn syrup. So it is possible that America's favorite sugar source, high fructose corn syrup, with its retained aflatoxin, along with corn syrup's propensity to cause metabolic syndrome, is what's actually driving this increase of primary liver cancer. Now, this theory has many dots that needs to be connected before we know for sure, but we need to know because liver cancer is a deadly disease. For now, we have at least one more reason to limit our high fructose corn syrup consumption. Well, today on Your Health, we'd like to discuss another supplement with amazing potential for cancer nutritional support, the amazing antioxidant curcumin. We'll find out what it does and why it may be helpful for you and your family. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Well, today we're going to be talking about one of my newest favorites in the supplement world, and that is curcumin. You know, curcumin is what I think of as the extract from the spice we know as turmeric. Well, when my girls were younger, I loved to cook, and I would always try to think of ways to get them to eat healthier. So I would make them scrambled tofu, which they did not like. Doesn't look like scrambled eggs. Well, I came across a recipe that said to use turmeric on the tofu to make it have that yellow appearance, and then it would look more like scrambled eggs. I did that. The kids loved it. Little did I know that sauteing that tofu in the oil, the olive oil, with the turmeric generously all over it, what I was giving them is a health benefit.
Yeah.
Wow, now we have scientific evidence that is going to amaze you.
Yes.
Richard, this one, I got to tell you, this one is just a new gold star.
Yes, it really is. This turmeric plant is amazing, and the curcumin that is extracted from turmeric. You know, since our last discussion of this compound, the curcumin, some 8 weeks ago, we have 60 new research articles. On the worldwide scene, it's hard to find turmeric because there's so much interest in it in the scientific community. The demand is skyrocketed, okay? This plant is amazing. Turmeric is a member of the ginger family, so the plant looks somewhat like a ginger plant. And the tuber, or I guess it's a rhizome, I guess technically what it is the turmeric component that the curcumin is extracted from. It really does. It looks a lot like the little bulbs of ginger you see at the grocery store that you can buy. It's very similar. It's related to it. The beautiful yellow color, that is the curcumin. That is what we're interested in. It's a polyphenolic antioxidant with a bright color that matches our desire to have a colorful plate. It's all part of this. That's your classic sign. Curcumin is the active yellow pigment in the spice turmeric. It's also found in curry. One thing I think we should point out is that turmeric or curcumin has very little taste. It's the curry spices that give that strong Asian flavor to foods. So if you don't really like that Asian flavor and you want to take advantage of turmeric, no problem, because it really doesn't, it has a very mild taste, and it's like applying it to the tofu scrambled egg concept, the kids accepted that readily. And I think you will accept it as well. In India, turmeric is a very common food. It's included in many of their dishes there. And epidemiologists noticed a long time ago that colon cancer rates in India are very low, even though they don't have our level of health care there, okay? Also, as they studied Indian populations further, they found Alzheimer rates are about a fourth the rate they are in the United States. This gathered attention. Alzheimer's is a big problem for this country and individually, and further study found that it's the curcumin component of their diet that conveys this type of health risk, lower cancer rates, lower Alzheimer's rate. Since that time, over 4,400 different research articles are now available at the National Institutes of Health, and an overview of the summary of all that research shows that curcumin has anti-tumor, antioxidant, anti-arthritis properties, anti-amyloid, that's your Alzheimer's disease, anti-ischemic, anti-inflammatory, antiviral, antibacterial, antiseptic, antimalarial properties. Now, I know you're saying nothing is that good. That's what you call a panacea. You know, we all know that there's no such thing as a panacea, a cure-all for everything. But I do want to assert curcumin is the closest thing I've ever found to a panacea. It's amazing, and I think you will find, as we review this current research as best we can, there's so much to be discussed today, that your jaw will drop just like mine did as I go through this research. Curcumin is best known as a potent antioxidant that counters virtually all types of free radicals, virtually all types. There is a problem with curcumin. The problem is it is a oil-soluble substance, and we're basically water-soluble creatures. And when you take just curcumin alone, say between meals with a glass of water, very little of it absorbs into our bloodstream. And the drug companies have taken this as an opportunity to change that molecule, turn it into a patentable drug that is readily absorbed, and claiming all the benefit for that. We saw the same phenomena with resveratrol. Well, resveratrol is in red wine, but you'd have to drink 1,000 glasses a day to get the benefit. The only way you're going to get it is with our new drug, right? We've heard that story. Don't let them fool you with that stuff. Curcumin does this even with minimal absorption. If we just increase the absorption of curcumin just a little bit, the health benefits are simply astounding. And we can do that easily. Increase the absorption 800% or more simply by dissolving it in oil. And your mention of the curcumin turmeric into the olive oil is one of the keys. Put it into a healthy oil, our body readily accepts it, okay? Extensive research now concludes curcumin is a powerful health-promoting agent with benefits for virtually all parts of the body. Its benefits include its antioxidant potential and more, all right? Let's talk a little bit about the antioxidant potential of curcumin. Basically what we're talking about, it is a phenomenal antioxidant molecule. All you budding chemists, anyone who has an interest in chemistry, find that curcumin molecule, the graphic representation of it, and you'll understand. There's Michael's reaction, there's OH group. It gets really, it's a biochemist's dream molecule, and you really enjoy looking at it if you have an interest in chemistry. First, the molecule curcumin is a potent antioxidant in and of itself. But we've also learned that curcumin has a direct effect on proteins that surround our DNA, and those proteins cause the DNA to increase production of natural antioxidants. So it's not like vitamin C in that the molecule itself does something, but it directs your DNA to make more glutathione, okay? And superoxide dismutase. You're supercharging your own body's mechanism through epigenetic influence. This is a huge area of study now, how substances in our environment or in our diet affect our DNA. And curcumin affects our DNA in a very positive way. It is a an oil-based molecule, yet they've been able to prove that it is an effective antioxidant even in water-based cytoplasm, in the water of the cell. So even though it's an oil-based compound, it's a powerful antioxidant when placed in water. See, now, the chemist will get this, but leave it to say, the antioxidant properties of curcumin are phenomenal. Let's talk a little bit about its affecting cancer, because this is where it holds much of our hope. High doses and even low doses from some studies causes cancer cell apoptosis, the death of cancer cells, in virtually all types of cancer tested. It was one positive study after another, one after another. You know, usually with these types of molecules and something we're very hopeful about, we find a limit to its ability. We haven't found that yet with curcumin. It's very exciting. Curcumin has been shown to stimulate the repair of the DNA that's been damaged that leads to cancer. Okay? This is one of its primary effects. So it directs the system to help fight cancer much more effectively. It also improves the response to traditional cancer therapies, chemotherapy, radiation. Outcomes improve across the board when curcumin is added to cancer therapy, okay? Studies have linked curcumin to halting the growth of breast cancer stem cells. I'm just giving you some examples. Breast cancer stem cells account for the resistance and eventual metastasis of breast cancer, treatment failures. Well, guess what? Curcumin halts that process, and it does it amazingly effectively, okay? It decreases the risk of hormone-driven breast cancer in laboratory animals through previously undiscovered phytoestrogen effects, okay? It blocks the effect of estrogen in driving a breast cancer, and they know exactly how it does it. See, our advances have come in the discovery of the mechanisms. We've observed the effect, and you can do that in a test tube, you can do it in physiologic studies, you can do it in epidemiologic studies, but we don't accept it as good, strong evidence until we know the mechanism. They're doing that now. What else? Inhibiting carcinogenic effect of tobacco on head and neck cancers. It stops the development of cancers associated with tobacco use. A couple more and we'll go to our break. Slowing oral cancer proliferation. China, they showed how they did it, suppressing biliary cancers. Liver cancers of the biliary tract are notoriously difficult to treat. Curcumin in a laboratory setting does this. Lowers leukemia risk, and we observe that in India with lower leukemias, and they've been able to identify the pathway and how it does it. This is the amazing part. What we're seeing in the research on cancer is drug companies' desire to take that curcumin molecule, change it, and patent that molecule and have a whole new area of cancer therapy. Can you imagine the billions in profits that would come if they are successful? I say stick with God's patent, stick with the original. Our knowledge is increasing to the point that we now know curcumin inhibits cancer development at all 6 stages of its growth. That's transformation, that's initiation, promotion of the cancer, the invasion into tissues, angiogenesis, the development of new blood vessels to the tumor so it can keep growing, and metastasis. All 6 stages of cancer invasion, it affects it in a very positive way in suppression. And if you add a chemotherapy agent to it, it makes the chemotherapy even more powerful while protecting you from the side effects of the chemotherapy. We could stop right there, and it would be a Gonstead molecule, wouldn't it? That's just cancer. We have more. Brain, heart, we'll have that when we return.
We're back, everyone, talking about the amazing spice. Well, actually, it's not a spice. Turmeric is the spice. Curcumin is the extract. But it is amazing. Richard, this was really quite a segment you did on the cancer support.
Yes.
And I think it's good to point out to everyone, be sure you work with your doctor. We don't want to give you the idea that you could use curcumin by itself in your cancer therapies. Yeah. But if you are going through cancer, be sure to consider it along with your cancer treatments.
Absolutely.
Richard, like you said, when you take it with your chemo, it makes it work better.
Yes, it does. It does, and we have so much evidence to support that now.
That's great.
Let's talk a little bit about the brain. You know, most of the degenerative neurologic diseases are based in inflammation. I'm talking about ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. These are degenerative diseases of the brain, and the root cause is based in inflammation. The microglial cells begin to attack the brain and certain structures, and it leads to the decay of mental status and the use of the neurologic system. They're devastating diseases, and there have been extensive research now on how curcumin helps to counter that inflammatory process. Dr. Blaylock writes in his books, curcumin has shown itself to be the king of anti-inflammatory substances, equal to the most powerful prescription drugs. And what has really impressed me is the research has evolved to the point where they know the mechanisms now how curcumin calms that inflammation. It's not just a categorical observation. They have the precise biochemical pathways. That takes a lot of money to understand that. Okay? We need to take advantage of that investment. It suppresses inflammation by downregulating the inflammation created by the omega-6 oils. Remember that discussion? We don't get enough 3s, we get too much 6s, corn oil, that type of thing. Curcumin calms that inflammatory process down. And it also works by, it's a complex system. It goes to the recognition of cells and everything, the initiation of lipopolysaccharide activated nitric oxide. That's all doctor talk and scientist talk. It calms that inflammatory process, and it does it amazingly effective. How about the amyloid formation of Alzheimer's disease? They now have discovered that curcumin counters that amyloid production and the inflammatory reaction it causes by 8 different mechanisms. And these are complex mechanisms that took brilliant minds to figure out, okay? When you combine curcumin with D3, the two together, it actually reverses Alzheimer's plaques. And it does it in humans. This has been done in humans, had to be based on autopsies and in animal studies, and they correlate the two together, stain it with certain things to check it out. It's all a process I read through. It's really quite amazing. Now, is it a standalone FDA-approved therapy for Alzheimer's? No, but one will come based on this molecule. It won't be curcumin. It'll be an analog, one that can be patented. I assure you, it's going to happen, and it'll happen within the next 10 to 15 years because we have no side effects of this substance. And so they feel it'll be relatively easy to tweak that molecule into a well-tolerated molecule, but it never works out that way. We tolerate what we've been eating for thousands of years, hundreds and thousands of years here. We're talking about curcumin, and its use in Asia for many hundreds of years. So we know that molecule is safe. Why look any further? Well, there's no profit in that. It's simple. But at least 8 different pathways that calms that inflammation. Combining magnesium with curcumin when a person has a stroke, give them two together, their stroke damage is 50% less. It calms that inflammatory reaction. It's a reperfusion type injury. We've talked about that. And curcumin is very effective in preventing that reperfusion injury. Curcumin supports the brain by lowering oxidative stress, and they know the mechanisms by which it does it. If you have iron overload, curcumin will bind that up in the brain and chelate it out and calm inflammation that way. It also increases that production of glutathione through DNA-directed metabolic pathways. So you're not taking an antidote with curcumin. You're taking something the body uses to amplify its healing response. And it's done very safely. That's the amazing part about it. Okay, here's one. Do you feel as you're getting a little older, it's getting harder and harder to balance the checkbook? It's getting harder to understand more of the complexities of life. It's just, oh, what's the use? You just don't have brain energy? Well, they've been able to show that curcumin ingestion increases brain energy by 158%. You see, this is big stuff. It's huge for the neurologists. They're loving this stuff. They want more and more and more on it, and it's coming. Let's talk a little bit about the heart. Even low doses of curcumin inhibits the formation of cholesterol plaques. It'll lower cholesterol levels. It'll lower triglyceride levels. It inhibits the platelet aggregation. It ends in those little clots that plug arteries that lead to damage from a microscopic level to a large macroscopic level. It inhibits that aggregation, okay? Multiple studies now show curcumin slows and prevents vascular disease. In lab animals, curcumin protects the arteries against the ravages of hypertension. You know, when that blood pressure is left unchecked, the artery gets thicker and thicker and thicker, and the lumen, the opening for that artery, gets smaller and smaller and smaller. This is the only substance I'm aware of that can actually reverse that. It has always been thought of as end-stage disease, no hope, nothing can be done for that end-stage hypertensive patient. But it appears from our animal and human studies now that curcumin has that potential. Now, they've got some details to work out, but there's great hope for end-stage hypertension. Imagine the advantage, the help for the kidney disease patients when they're not getting the blood flow to the kidney. Let's see, multiple studies show curcumin improves heart failure, preservation of heart and lung function with the bypass injury, you know, the reperfusion. We've explained that. It's the tourniquet concept. When you release the tourniquet and all those inflammatory products go into the circulation, that's when the inflammation, that's when the damage occurs. That's why a machine will never be able to do what the heart and lungs do in bypass surgery. There's always a price to pay. There's some damage. Well, if we load the patient with curcumin before the coronary artery bypass, they have significantly less damage. And they know they know the mechanism now. See, this is just astounding to me. I cannot contain my enthusiasm for this molecule. This is the type of thing we've been searching for, and as with my start in biochemistry, that's how I got into this medical game, is through biochemistry. That's the holy grail type of thing that they're looking for, agents that have a true effect. We're headed to a break here, but one of curcumin's most amazing benefits is to the diabetic. Remember, the diabetic has eye disease. The diabetic has kidney disease. It damages their nerves, and don't forget the liver problem. Curcumin plays a role in helping those problems as well when we return.
We've been talking about curcumin. Isn't this just fascinating? Wow. Now, Richard, you have a whole series of studies prepared for the diabetic, and you know, yes, the diabetic suffers so much.
Yes, the oxidative and inflammatory state of diabetes leads to a whole
and
list
we're
of
seeing diabetes coming earlier and earlier, even into children.
And you know, the magnesium role and everything, the two together, yes, it's a real problem. Well, a preliminary study showed that when humans and lab animals, they did both, when you're fed curcumin, their diabetics, their blood sugar levels improved. Well, of course, that piques interest, and scientists at Columbia wanted to know how and why this happens. And what they found out was that curcumin reduces the inflammatory state induced by diabetes. And it also counters the insulin resistance through enzymatic manipulation. Well, meaning, you get to the root cause of the insulin resistance, and curcumin calms that. So it improves the parameters of diabetes control. What is that? Your long-term glucose, your short-term, your triglyceride levels, your cholesterol levels. These all improve when you calm that inflammatory response.
Okay, so are you saying then that if somebody is pre-diabetic,
yes,
and they start the curcumin along with everything else,
yes, plus the cayenne,
is there a chance that they could stall the onset of real diabetes?
Yes, absolutely. This is what we're seeing. The research supports that notion. It absolutely does. They've been able to show, here's an excellent study reported in Wound Repair and Regeneration. Curcumin enhances immunity and promotes white blood cell proliferation and wound healing in diabetics. Now, you may have the foot ulcer, you may see it, you may be aware of it, but trust me, diabetics, even if you don't have the wound ulcer, you have lesions throughout your body, damage that you never see. It's the slow, indolent, progressive course of diabetes, and curcumin neutralizes this effect. Here's one related to the liver. It's not diabetes. Lindane is a pesticide that's used on scabies and head lice. And it works great on scabies and head lice, but it has profound neurotoxicity. And something like 1 out of 100 kids that you wash their lice-infested head with Lindane goes into convulsions. Okay? Well, they did this in laboratory animals. If you give them curcumin first, they don't get the convulsions. It is that powerful in protecting the liver and the brain with the Lindane exposure. Pretty amazing. Curcumin protects from immune-induced carbon tetrachloride liver fibrosis in lab animals. That's a standard procedure to assess toxicity and protectiveness of certain compounds. Carbon tetrachloride is an agent that guarantees liver failure, and the amazing thing about it is if you treat before or after exposure to carbon tetrachloride, the liver survives. You get that? Before or after, it doesn't matter. Even after the damage is done, the liver has the ability to come back if you're using curcumin. Now, that's lab animals, okay? But that is powerful, powerful evidence. Here's lung. Oxidative and stress damage. Lung, this is very common. Curcumin improves lung function in cystic fibrosis patients. You know, they don't secrete well. They have thick, tenacious secretions. And curcumin opens that up. It thins the secretions. They can breathe better. But even more amazing, in chronic long-term asthma, the airways become thick and tough, much like long-term hypertension. Remember I said in long chronic hypertension, the artery gets thicker and thicker and thicker and the lumen smaller and smaller. Same phenomena happens with asthma, chronic asthma. Guess what? Curcumin reverses it, and they have tissue samples to prove it. So that means those of you with long-standing asthma, it's getting harder and harder to control. Do what your doctor tells you. I'm not telling you not to, but add curcumin, and I think you'll have the breath of life back in you after 3, 6, 9 months. It can actually reverse that process. This is amazing research for asthma and reactive airway disease. It truly gives us hope for many of these desperate conditions. Curcumin is a powerful anti-inflammatory. It shows no side effects. It is as strong as any aspirin, ibuprofen, naproxen, any of those, Indomethacin, any of them. Curcumin is just as powerful without any of the side effects. Studies support that. The kidneys, time is short. In chronic kidney disease and renal failure, there's intense inflammation in the kidneys. Blood circulation is poor, oxidative capacity, and to handle all that is down in chronic kidney disease. Cumin lowers kidney inflammation and protects kidneys and organs from ischemia, reperfusion, injury. Dr. Rich Snyder, nephrologist, has been on our program. He studies kidney, has been studying kidneys for 20-some years now, 25 years now, and he puts his patients in renal failure on curcumin, and then he follows it with cordyceps. Relieve the oxidative stress. The cordyceps returns blood flow to the kidneys, and he's getting improved function on the kidneys. And it's not just Dr. Snyder, it's in the literature, okay? Now, I know when you're in liver failure or kidney failure, you really have to do exactly what your doctor says. But if enough people start taking this information to the hepatologist, to the nephrologist, and say, hey, what about this? Can I add this spice to my regimen? Can I have a little curcumin or turmeric on my pot roast? They're going to say, well, sure, you can have that. You know, if more people do this, we're going to get breakthroughs. It's going to help a lot of people in kidney and renal failure. Intestinal tract, Tremendous anti-inflammatory. Here's one that really caught my attention, give the idea of the protection of curcumin. You know, aspirin can eat a hole in your stomach, right? It can cause terrible ulcers. Between 20 and 30,000 people die every year from hemorrhage due to aspirin and aspirin-like drugs induced hemorrhage of the intestinal tract. Curcumin reverses that damage and heals the ulcer better than proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers. Better. Without robbing your system of B12, without depleting any absorption of any nutrient. This is in laboratory animals. We have more to go to make it a standard of care, but it's coming. It's a powerful inhibitor of intestinal inflammation. Inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, even the inflammation of irritable bowel syndrome. Curcumin is playing a role here, and it can help you tremendously. Well, let's see. We have one other area. Oh, the antibiotic properties. What about chronic yeast? Is that your life health challenge, chronic yeast? Curcumin can help you as well. We'll be right back.
We're back, everyone, talking about curcumin. This is so interesting. Richard has now some miscellaneous research to bring to you. Richard, yeah. I thought I saw, yes, you do. Tell us all about curcumin and candida.
Yes, you know, so many are struggling with intestinal dysbiosis, leaky gut syndrome, chronic yeast infection of the gut. It is a major player in chronic health problems. It absolutely is. India has done quite a bit of research on curcumin, and they did a study and they tested it as an anti-yeast agent, okay? And they tested it against 14 different strains of candida. It's generally accepted that 6 strains of candida affect humans. I think it's probably much more closer to the 8 to the 14 that they tested. But in any event, all 14 different strains of candida that can affect humans, curcumin took care of it, no problem. So it is perfectly logical to include curcumin into your herb rotation cycle to help control your yeast syndrome, okay? It's excellent for that. Plus, you'll get all those added benefits we've already talked about. You know, most people use an agent like curcumin for one specific problem they have. But rest assured, the benefits are throughout the system. It's quite amazing. Curcumin improves antibiotic activity against Staph aureus. You know, all this talk about resistant staph and how it's really a problem, especially in gymnasiums, locker rooms, this type of place, and hospitals, primarily hospitals, but in the community, that's how you get it, is in the gymnasium. And you're on an antibiotic and it doesn't want to go away, add curcumin to the plan. It'll make a huge difference. It negates the antibiotic resistance in these bacteria. Do you have a child who has uncontrollable cavities? You know, one cavity after another? Start feeding them curcumin. Put it in the diet. Boy, it makes a huge difference. Studies support it. Korea, they did a series of studies on this. Quite effective. And the same germ that affects the cavities, the Streptococcus mutans, also gets into the bloodstream, goes down to the heart, and causes endocarditis. They tested it against that. It's effective in preventing endocarditis as well. Pretty amazing. We were learning that curcumin is an effective heavy metal chelator. You know, maybe heavy metals, maybe it's lead exposure, maybe it's arsenic, cadmium, whatever the heavy metal. Get on the curcumin. You get the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effect, plus it's a good chelator. Let's see, copper overload, Wilson's disease. Wilson's disease is copper overload, and it is highly damaging to the liver and to the brain. A study was done in Argentina. Curcumin neutralizes the oxidative stress of copper overload. It's a very serious condition for those who have it. It's not very common, fortunately. It's a genetic predisposition to this type of thing. You know, all our water comes through copper pipes, and if you have Wilson's disease, you accumulate way too much copper, and it is highly toxic. So that's something very helpful to that.